Norrell could no longer deny the consequences of his actions. Lady Pole was not the only one touched by the gentleman's magic. Strange returned from Spain changed, more powerful, more confident, more questioning. He saw the cracks in Norrell's control, and he did not like what he found. Strange asked Norrell about the gentleman, about the deal that had been made. Norrell refused to answer. The truth, he believed, was too dangerous to share. Strange began to read more deeply, searching for the origins of English magic. He found something Norrell had tried to forget. Magic was not meant to be controlled. He discovered the truth about the Raven King and the price of power. Magic had returned, but it had never truly left. Their friendship began to crumble, not in words, but in silence, in secrets. Norrell feared what Strange would become. Strange feared what Norrell already was. Their friendship began to crumble, not in words, but in silence, in secrets. Norrell feared what Strange would become. Strange feared what Norrell already was. And as the gentleman watched from the shadows, he smiled. The storm had begun, and magic would never be the same again. Strange had learned the truth. The gentleman had ruled from the shadows long enough, and now he would face a magician who was no longer afraid of him. He stood alone in a ruined castle, surrounded by wind, silence, and ancient magic. The spell he was about to cast had not been used in centuries, and for good reason. Strange began to write, not in a book, but in the very air with ink made from shadow. His words would not just change the world, they would rewrite it. He called upon the names of the lost magicians, the forgotten kings, the Raven King himself. The earth trembled, the sky darkened. Magic was no longer a secret. The gentleman appeared, not in rage, but in sorrow. "You do not know what you are doing," he whispered. "But I do." Strange spell began to take shape, a doorway, a command, a final act of defiance. He would not just defeat the gentleman, he would banish him forever. With every word, the gentleman's power weakened, his kingdom faded, his influence vanished. England was no longer his to rule, and when the last word was spoken, the gentleman was gone. But so was something else, something Strange could never return. The war was over, the gentleman was gone. But England had changed. Magic had returned, and now it was leaving again. Strange had won, but victory came at a cost he had not foreseen. The magic that had once flowed through England was fading. Norrell, broken and alone, returned to Yorkshire, a man without a purpose. He had spent his life trying to control magic, and now it was gone. Strange wandered the land, searching for traces of what had been lost. He had saved England, but he had lost something of himself. The books no longer spoke. The spells no longer worked. Magic was leaving England. It had returned for a time, and now it was returning to sleep. Strange knew there was only one place where magic still lived, the world of the fairies. And so, he made a choice, to go there and never return. He stepped through the door one last time, not as a man of England, but as a man of magic, and the door closed behind him, never to open again. And so, English magic ended, not with a war, but with a whisper. The last magicians were gone, and the world moved on. Jonathan Strange was sent to Spain to assist British forces in their war against Napoleon. He would not carry a sword, but he would wield magic. The battlefield was chaotic, filled with smoke, gunfire, and confusion. Strange stood at the edge, watching the chaos unfold. With a single word, he summoned illusions that misled the enemy. French troops believed they were surrounded and turned to flee. His spells were subtle, but their impact was immense. He had not just fought, he had changed the course of battle. As the sun set over the battlefield, Strange returned to his tent. He was no longer just a magician, he was a force of nature. And in London, Mr. Norrell watched from afar, feeling both pride and fear. For the first time, he saw not a pupil, but a rival. Strange began to study the ancient texts on his own, not as a student of Norrell, but as a seeker of truth. He read about the Raven King, the old magic of the North, and the price of power. One night, while reading by candlelight, he felt a strange pull, a whisper from the past. It was not a voice, but a memory buried deep in the book. Without thinking, he spoke a word, and the page glowed. A symbol appeared in the air, floating above the book. It was not a spell from Norrell's books. It was something older, wilder. This was the magic of the North, and it had chosen him. Strange did not understand what he had done, but he knew one thing: he could never go back. In London, Norrell grew uneasy, sensing that something had changed. The balance of magic was shifting, and he was no longer in control. The gentleman had watched Strange from the shadows, not as an enemy, but as a game. He had waited centuries for someone like this, a magician who could challenge him. He visited Strange in dreams, speaking in riddles, offering clues. "You're not alone," he whispered, "and you're not the first." Strange woke with a start, his hands trembling, his mind racing. Was the gentleman real, or was he just a figment of his imagination? He decided to investigate, not for Norrell, but for himself. He traveled to the north, to the ruins of ancient castles and forgotten tombs. There, he found a book, written in a language no one had spoken in centuries. It told of the Raven King, the lost magic, and the price of power. As he read, he felt a connection, not just to the book, but to the land itself. This was not just magic, it was history, identity, and destiny. And in the dark corners of England, the gentleman smiled. The game had begun, and Strange was now a player. Strange returned to London with the book and with a new understanding of magic. He was no longer just a man of science. He was a man of legend. He showed the book to Norrell, hoping for approval or at least understanding. But Norrell refused to look at it, fearing what it might reveal. Strange realized then that Norrell was afraid, not of the magic, but of losing control. He had built a world of order, and now chaos was returning. Strange began to write his own notes, not in Norrell's style, but in his own. He recorded the symbols, the spells, the whispers, all of it. He wrote of the Raven King, of the old magic, and of the price of power. This was not just a record, it was a declaration. And in the quiet hours of the night, the gentleman listened, knowing that the balance was changing. The old magic was waking, and it would not be tamed. Strange had become a powerful magician, but power came with a cost. Every spell he cast left a mark, not on the world, but on himself. He began to dream of the past, of kings, wars, and magic long gone. He saw the Raven King, not as a hero, but as a warning. The gentleman appeared again, not to speak, but to show. He showed Strange a vision, a future where magic ruled, and men were nothing. Strange woke in terror, his hands shaking, his heart pounding. He had not just gained power, he had gained responsibility. And in London, Norrell watched, seeing not a student, but a threat. The age of English magic was beginning, and it would not end as he had planned. Strange sat at his desk, staring at the open book. He had learned the secrets of the past, but now he must decide the fate of the future. And as the candle flickered, he whispered, "I will not let it destroy us." If you enjoyed this cinematic journey through Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, please like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss next part. This is not just reading, this is seeing the story. Every like, comment, and share helps me keep creating these visual book experiences. So thank you for being part of Brainstorm. See you in the next chapter.